One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. This is the best day of the week. Not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Executive Vice President of the Heartland Institute, which is an organization that has been around for 41 years. And we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland Institute and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth to counter the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And also like, share, and subscribe, and leave some comments underneath the video. All of these easy tasks convince YouTube's very mysterious algorithm to smile upon this program. And that gets the show in front of even more people. Oh, and as a reminder, big tech and the legacy media are not real big fans of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program. So if you want to support this channel, because we have been demonetized, we're still working on it, but we are demonetized. But you can support this program by going to heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other friends of this program who help bring the show to the world every single week. And before we get started, we want to thank our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, the CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. Let's get started. We have a very big show today, and we have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts. He's Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That. We have Sterling Burnett, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is also the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center for Climate and Environmental Policy at Heartland. We have Linnea Lukin. She's a research fellow for energy and environment policy at the Heartland Institute. And of course, as usual, our producer, Andy Singer, behind the curtain, making sure everything looks and flows great. And we are very happy to welcome back a good friend of the show and a good friend of ours, Chris Martz. He's a meteorologist. He's a very prolific user of social media, especially X. And now he is with our friends at CFACT working on climate policy over there. Welcome with those fantastic aviator glasses, Chris.
Thanks for having me on.
Is that your Joe Biden Halloween costume you still have on? Because he loves those glasses.
Come on, man.
I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you. We have Michael Johansson is saying hi from Denmark. We have a truly international audience that we're very excited to see here every single week. And we know you're going to be active in the chat. At the end of the program, our last segment is always Q&A. So you can go ahead and start putting your questions in now for the panel. But before we get into our main topic, which is covering the COP30 down in Brazil, the big UN climate confab, we like to start every show with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. We should be so lucky to be that warm. All right. This item and our first of the crazy climate news of the week. Actually, a couple of viewers reached out to me via email and also on social media asking that we cover this. It was already on the list, so this is going to be great. This comes from the New York Post. Now there might be a new ice age after all we've heard. Headline is climate scientists claim Gulf Stream could be near collapse, predicting a new ice age. I'll read a bit for you. A key Atlantic current could be pushed to the brink of collapse within decades, supposedly ushering in a new ice age and dramatically raising sea levels, climate scientists have claimed in a controversial new study published in the journal Communications, Earth, and Environment. Per the new findings, the at-risk current in question is the Atlantic Meridional, thank you, overturning circulation, or AMOC. We'll stick with that. A, quote, conveyor belt of the ocean that funnels warm water toward the ocean surface from the tropics into the northern hemisphere. The study stated that the source of this marine temperature regulator, the Greenland ice sheet, is being thawed amid warming temperatures, causing meltwater runoff to leach into the North Atlantic, leading to stagnation. This has resulted in, quote, a distinctive temperature fingerprint located some 3,280 to 6,560 feet below the ocean surface, according to reporting by the Daily Mail. Quote, here we identify a distinctive temperature fingerprint in the equatorial Atlantic that signals the AMOC change, the authors wrote. The robust physical mechanism and reliable detection make this fingerprint a valuable metric for AMOC monitoring in a warming climate. The presence of the marine hot pocket appears to suggest that the current slowdown has been occurring for decades and could foment a total decline before the end of the century, per the study. Now, I want to start with you here, Anthony. This is really something. The climate panic industrial complex likes to pretend that they didn't warn of an impending ice age back in the 1970s, but they did. They did. And the UN Secretary General just a few months ago was warning us about global boiling and even said the oceans are boiling. And now here we have a study that they call controversial, but it's basically the plot to the movie The Day After Tomorrow. And that's science fiction, not science.
Yeah, I shake my head every time I see one of these things because it's the same crap over and over and over again. You know, it's just another modeling study. And this one, you know, is saying the jet stream's going to collapse, or the Gulf Stream's going to collapse, and everything's going to go cold. Then we've had people saying the Gulf Stream is strengthening. Then we've had people saying the Gulf Stream hasn't changed at all. Nobody can get this shit together on this particular topic. They are all over the map, literally. And so, you know, take all of this with not even a grain of salt, just flat out reject it. It's garbage because it's a modeling study. Now, a modeling study doesn't mean anything. The outcome is whatever they want it to be, tweak their little dials, and you end up with something that looks like they can grab headlines. And that's what this is. This is nothing but a headline grabber, obviously, by where it's at. And so there's no panic, there's no collapse, and this whole thing is following the script of the terrible movie, the Day After Tomorrow. Saw the Gulf Stream collapse and giant cold front sweep in and freeze people in their tracks, and freeze the library in New York where Jake Gyllenhaal and his girlfriend are holed up. It's just junk. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah. The Post was two interesting things about the Post. If you want to put something in bold, it's claim in the headline. And I think it was, did they say could or possibly or something like that as well? Look, the sun could stop spinning, could stop being the center of the universe tomorrow. It could blinker out. A black hole could suck us all in next week. Lots of things could and possibly happen. This is as well grounded as the old idea that the moon is made of cheese. Anthony says take it with a pinch of salt. I say throw the whole salt shaker at it. You've got two studies published in also peer-reviewed journals earlier this year, I think January and March, that said just the opposite. That said the Gulf Stream was stable or increasing. Every new study says something different. It's increasing, and that's a sign of climate change. It's decreasing, and that's caused by climate change. In either case, it's disaster for us. And for me, the main problem is how long have we been able to study and measure the Gulf Stream? have we been? Were we measuring this 200 years ago? No. Were we measuring it 70 years ago? No. We've only been measuring it, and that distinctive footprint, fingerprint that they talk about. How long have they been studying the distinctive fingerprint that we know can serve as a proxy for everything else that we've never understood or known about before? But now we can be quite certain that this one thing that we've identified somehow as a distinctive fingerprint proves that the AMOC is about to collapse. Look, this is a little studied, or not, I should say, not long studied ocean circulation pattern. We haven't known about ocean circulation patterns for 200 years, or probably even 100 years, certainly not 150 years. We haven't been able to track them for even a shorter time than that. And we haven't had the computer models to spin out various scenarios for even a shorter time than that. There is not no evidence. There is conflicting evidence as to what's going on with the AMOC, and it may not be changing at all. They say, well, the last time this happened was during the past ice age. I'm sorry, were they measuring the ocean currents during the last ice age? Do we know that it wasn't circulating during the last ice age? I don't think we do. I don't think we have proxy data that shows that we have proxy data for an ocean current. It is all fear mongering.
Yeah.
They are selling fear. They are selling more funding for their research. They are selling more power for them to dictate our lives. But what they're not selling is scientifically valid research.
Yeah, Chris, you've been hitting this a couple times on X this week, so I'm sure you have something to say.
Yeah, this whole scare story is interesting because it flip-flops every few months. And as Sterling mentioned, there's a million different studies out there on this, and they all come to opposite conclusions. So when people claim, people that like scientific consensus, they think that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But this issue particularly, there's no consensus on this issue. And there's been some studies that have suggested that the AMOC is weakening, such as Kaiser et al. 2018 and Kaiser et al. 2020-21, which found that there's been a 15 to 20% weakening in the AMOC. And I think they're proxy for it because they don't really measure the actual AMOC. They've used different proxies for it. And they looked at subpolar North Atlantic sea surface temperature anomalies, which have, they show a distinct cooling pattern. And they say that that's what's weakening. Yet, there's other studies. There's one that was published last year, Weston et al. 2024. And they claim that the AMOC is on a tipping course. It's on a tipping point course. It's going to shut down completely. But in the study, they admit in the abstract that there has been no such shutdown observed even in paleoclimate records. The AMOC has shut down, has slowed down rather. And even that might have been some of the cause of the Little Ice Age after the medieval warm period, because it's a natural process that the speed does fluctuate. When it gets a little too warm, you get some meltwater flux, and then current slows down, and Europe cools, and the northern hemisphere cools. That's been observed in paleoclimate records, but there's never been an actual shutdown of it that we know of. And in order to get the AMOC to shut down in their model in that study, they had to impose a strong freshwater forcing that was greater than when the ice sheet covering North America melted at the end of the last glacial maximum, which translated to about 6 centimeter per year sea level rise rate, which is completely unrealistic, even under the high emissions RCP 8.5 scenario. And then also, they had to run the model for 1,700 years in order to get it to actually shut down. So this is just pseudoscience is what it is. And even the IPCC states that with medium confidence that a shutdown by 2100 is pretty unlikely to happen. And as for the Ice Age scare of the 1970s, I mentioned this, and I got a bunch of comments from people coming at me saying that, it was never an Ice Age scare in the 1970s. Most of the papers were publishing about global warming. But yet, And while that's probably true, it's important to note, as Anthony can attest
And
to
it's
this.
not probably true. I lived through it.
Well, listen. The scientific literature probably didn't talk about it, but there was a ton of media coverage about it based on a handful of studies. And the average person is not going to go to a scientist. They're going to read the media headlines. And the Ice Age scare was very much real in the 1970s and even 1960s, and it was media driven.
Let me interrupt there. First off, some of the prominent advocates of climate alarm, like Steve Schneider and John.
Yeah,
Holden,
there was a paper about that, 1971.
It was in their book. They wrote it in their book. Now, these were
Yeah,
not nobodies. These were prominent advocates that said, yeah, we had a little ice age there. And I would also like to say, it wasn't until very, very recent history that anyone thought the ocean currents were behind ice ages. For the vast majority of time we've been studying them, they talked about Milankovitch cycles, large cycles that didn't have to do with ocean currents causing the ice age. So let's say the AMOC shuts down, but we don't have a new Milankovitch cycle. We don't get the ice age that we may get a cooling. We may get some ice expansion, but we don't get glaciers down through Wisconsin, and we certainly don't get them on the Atlantic coast in the space of 48 hours, as the movie showed. You know, there's the Earth. Ocean cycles are complex. Atmospheric chemistry and its interactions with solar winds, cosmic rays, all the other things are complex. Clouds are complex. Well, ice ages are complex. There's not a uniform, a unilateral single cause of deep ice ages, and certainly not one that's tied directly to the AMOC outside of any climate model.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that we have a Climate at a Glance article that addresses this issue. Basically, the Climate at a Glance article shows that we have all of these ocean currents and all these studies, and it's been flipping and flopping back and forth for the last 20 years. And the bottom line is that there's no consensus on this. Not that consensus is important. There's just really no proof that it's going to go one way or the other. And Chris made an excellent point in that the paleo climate record shows no indication of any kind of a shutdown in any of these ocean currents. And so it's just not plausible. It's just another modeling scare tactic. The only thing I think that could possibly shut down these ocean currents would be chemtrails.
Oh no!
Don't start that, Anthony. But hold on. I don't know.
I'm joking, of course.
I don't know how the paleo climate record could show anything about currents, ocean currents.
Well, it has to do with depositions of sediments and things like that.
I understand. You have waxing and waning of coastlines. You have shells that show up in one place in the past, but that doesn't mean they were deposited there by currents. So I just, I think that's poor proxy if they're saying, oh, well, some shells here show that the current shut down, as opposed to continental drift, or once the land was cleared, oysters started showing up there, as opposed to being deposited there. I think we can say nothing about currents. In geologic time.
Yeah. Well, I get from the private chat here that the audio for Chris has apparently gone out, so he can't hear us, which is actually a good thing considering when Anthony Watch just dropped there for a minute ago. So that would have triggered him. So it dropped at the right time. So we will try to get Chris. Actually, we may get him in here. Can you hear us, Chris?
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I was just explaining to the audience your audio went out at the perfect time, and you can find out what I mean by that when you rewatch this show. Let's move on to our next item here, which is actually good news. Sometimes the crazy climate news is kind of good. And this is, I've titled it, Dems Go Quiet on Climate. This comes from the Washington Post. We touched on this a little bit, I think, last week. Headline is, the big issue Democrats have stopped talking about. An analysis of lawmakers' appearances and social media posts show they are going quiet on climate. read here for you. A few years ago, climate change was everywhere. Democrats, buoyed by the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, talked constantly about the transition to clean energy and the threat of rising extreme weather events. In 2002, over 1,000 companies across the globe reported science-based climate targets, more than in the previous 7 years combined. The world was still heady with energy from the landmark Paris Agreement. Countries were passing hundreds of climate laws every year amid a wave of climate marches and activism. Now all that has changed. Since the beginning of 2025, according to data analyzed by the Washington Post, Democrats have pulled back from talking about climate change. At the same time, nations and companies have been whittling down their goals, pulling back from their most ambitious plans to lower carbon emissions, or going silent on the issue entirely. Quote, climate change moves down the list of priorities when people are feeling economically insecure, said Josh Freed, Senior Vice President for Climate and Energy at the center-left think tank Third Way. Quote, there has been a course correction. According to a Post analysis of social media posts, podcast appearances, and speeches, congressional Democrats' mentions of the words climate change and climate have decreased from a peak in August 2022 when the party passed the Inflation Reduction Act. According to the analysis, 2025 has seen the fewest mentions of climate change since the Post started gathering data in March 2022. According to a recent Gallup poll, Americans are concerned about global warming, but the issue ranks lowest in concern among all environmental issues polled, below the extinction of plant and animal species, polluted drinking water, and the loss of tropical rainforests. Quote, climate change has fallen into the friend zone of voting, Gentleson said. And as in life, when you've fallen into the friend zone, it's really hard to get out of it. Friend zone, that is the worst. Linnea, I don't know if climate being in the friend zone is a permanent status for climate in the Democratic Party, but it certainly looks like this topic's going to have to get in the gym, get in shape, and maybe get a personality transplant.
Yeah, we are leaving climate change on red in the Democratic Party. Yeah, no, it's interesting to see what astonishing principle the Democrats have on this issue, right? I thought it was an existential threat. Apparently not that existential if you can drop it for every other conversation just like that, right? Yeah, they're completely and utterly callous about all of this. They are not actually concerned about climate change. It's all very cynical, I think, especially for politicians. You know, if there's not a popular media push for it, then they don't care. If it doesn't get them more views or more votes, then they don't care about it. Even if they assert that they believe that it's, you know, world-ending catastrophe. That's just like, I can't imagine being in that position, believing that climate change is going to end humanity and then just not worrying about it for an election cycle or two. It's just crazy. So yeah, I think it's going to get worse for them too, as long as the Trump administration stays the course and gives them enough other stuff to talk about. And let's not forget, you know, if the Trump administration continues cutting off funding, it's pretty amazing how all of a sudden when you cut off funding on this issue, it gets talked about less, like significantly less, by the people who, again, claim that they're extremely concerned about it, but not concerned about it enough to privately fund research or to, you know, push for it regardless of attention.
Gee, this all began at the beginning of 2025. What event happened then that could have brought about this radical change? I don't know what it was. Some might suggest it was the election and swearing in of Donald John Trump as president of the United States, who took a different tack on climate change. I believe he's called it a con job and a hoax. And he's been attacked for that. But you know who seems to believe it? And this is an odd thing. I've never understood the Democrats on this. They thought it was a big issue. They've always thought it's a big issue. Yet poll after poll after poll, survey after survey, not just this year, not last year, over the decades, shows the needle hasn't moved on climate change at all. About somewhere in the range of 40 to 50% people are concerned about it, but it doesn't rank anywhere in their top list of concerns. Never has. It's always ranked behind, even on environmental issues, behind clean air, behind clean water, sometimes behind and sometimes ahead of slightly species issues, but always behind clean air and clean water. It's never been considered by the public the existential threat. And you know how you know that most of all? When they're asked how much they're willing to pay to prevent the destruction of the earth, which even some polls show that they believe will happen in the next 20 years, less than $1, less than 10 cents. You know, if you increase my gasoline prices by 10 cents a gallon, I'm out. If my electricity bill goes up by $10 a month, I'm out. That doesn't sound like they take this very seriously, that this is something they consider an existential threat. So I never understood why the Democratic politicians leapt on this so strongly. It's never been the big issue that they've claimed. It was not an existential threat before. It's not an existential threat now. And Linnea is right. It's amazing if they really, really believed it in their heart of hearts, as opposed to it was political positioning. And I think idiotic political positioning, but it was their calculation, that it was an existential threat, that the earth is being destroyed. How is the earth not destroyed now as opposed to before the election? Why is affordability more important to Democrats in Virginia and New Jersey and even Georgia than climate change? We gotta suffer some pain if we're going to prevent temperatures from rising. There's no way you don't have to sacrifice for that. You got to give up the stuff you like: meat, cars, electricity, air conditioning. You got to give it up if you're going to save the climate. Yet no one seems willing to do that. And the Democrats seem willing to tell people they need to be doing that anymore.
Yeah. Well, and Sterling, I think it's what we've talked about before, that, you know, climate change is just the vehicle for policy prescriptions that they want anyway. And they just elected an actual socialist communist in New York for mayor. They can now get the policies that they support anyway, politically at the moment on the left. You can just vote for socialist candidates and they get in. They have, they support government-run grocery stores and restricting vehicle travel, all that stuff. So they're getting the policies that they want, and they didn't even have to leverage climate to do it. So that might be part of why they're dropping the climate issues too.
Well, wait, they got the candidate that 20% of the New Yorkers wanted, because that's all that voted in the election. But whether they get those policies is another matter.
Yeah, but they think they're going to.
Whether they get the takeover of the rent for buildings and publicly owned grocery stores in New York, we'll see. Time will tell. But if they do, I don't make many predictions, but I'm going to make this prediction. If they get government-owned grocery stores, you're going to see something like what my wife's family's experienced in Venezuela. All the food is cheap. There's just no food on the shelves.
Yeah, that's kind of beside the point that I'm trying to make, which is that, they're looking
all you can eat if you can find it.
They're looking for support on policies that they support regardless of what vehicle they use to get there. And they have the support without needing to claim that it's because the oceans are boiling.
Right. You're right.
And so they're just running with it, and they don't have to use climate as the vehicle right now.
All right. Good points all. Let's move on to our third item, which I have titled "The Natives Are Restless." If you like that headline, or if you don't like that headline, the person responsible for it is our friend Craig Rucker over at CFACT, which is an organization that Chris Martz is also affiliated with. But he used that headline to write up this little bit of color, because he was, I should say, at COP30. I believe we were thinking about having him on the show today, but he and our other friend from CFACT, Mark Moran, are actually on a plane at this very moment coming back home. But this is a really good report from Craig at CFACT from COP30. So let me read some for you. It's pretty fun. Some real fireworks kicked off yesterday evening when an irate crew of 50 to 100 Tupinamba warriors, some decked out in their striking traditional feathers and body paint, stormed the blue zone like it was the Alamo. These aren't your Hollywood stereotypes of eco warriors glued to trees. Rather, they are proud, resilient people who have stewarded the Amazon for generations. After I snapped a few photos with them around the COP Green Zone venue today, I found them as warm and welcoming as any tailgate party at a football game back home. It's clear they are not here for Al Gore's PowerPoint on carbon footprints. Their gripe: why is a leftist government hosting a global gab fest that bulldozes their sacred lands for an 8-mile highway, displaces Akai farmers without a dime in compensation, and sidelines their voices in favor of radical agitators? Their breach on Wednesday was chaotic. Doors were kicked in. Chants of "our land is not for sale" echoed off the walls, and batons and protesters shoved back at security. Now, Craig points out that Brazil's far-left Socialist Party tried to glom on to this native protest. But as Craig learned when he chatted with some of those native protesters via an interpreter, they were not really into all that Marxist mumbo jumbo. As Craig writes, their concerns are simpler and more American. They want economic development. They want roads that connect their villages to markets, jobs that lift families out of poverty without chaining them to endless welfare handouts. They are for mining and industry. These folks see opportunity, not oppression, if it's done with respect for their culture and values. That's the real scandal here at the Climate Summit. The indigenous voices aren't the problem. It's how the radical left co-ops them like props in a bad diversity play. Chris, I want to start with you, since these are your colleagues, your professional colleagues, Mark and Craig, but you didn't get to go down to COP this time, obviously, because you're here with us, but hope you get to go to one before they cancel them.
Yeah, it would be interesting to go. They actually asked if I wanted to go with them this year back in the summer, but obviously I'm a little too busy to do that. But it would be a good opportunity to go down there and stir the pot.
Yeah. I mean, Sterling, we are actually you and Anthony were contemplating going down there to Brazil with our friends Craig and Mark, and just look at what all you missed. You missed, to see pushback from people who are, supposedly climate justice is for the benefit of these people, and they were saying let's just say they swiped left on that one.
All that we missed: lice and bed bug ridden mattresses, open sewers outside our hotel windows with what I'm sure is a wonderful stench.
Don't forget the fact that we are not allowed to flush toilet paper.
Yeah, you got indoor toilets, sort of, just don't use them. Look, I have seen, I've not been to Belém proper, but I have seen what this kind of poverty is like. My wife's from Venezuela. Even in modern cities there, like Maracaibo, the drainage ditches and sewers are filled with trash and garbage. You can have a high-rise apartment complex that looks pretty nice, bars everywhere, on the windows, on the doors, trash outside, not kept up. I made a joke in a conversation that they held a major conference, brought in thousands of people to a place that doesn't have modern sewage and whose septic tanks were never intended to handle that much sewage. And someone pointed out to me, septic tanks are sort of a 19th century technology. They're talking about, a 12th century technology. There aren't septic tanks for a lot of this stuff. It's buckets. It's latrines dug. And so this was an ill-suited place to hold this. The main theme of the conference is, how are we going to pay to keep forest around? And so what do to get the conference going? Mow down thousands of acres and hundreds of thousands of trees. That's how you save trees. And pour concrete, a very carbon intensive technology, for the roads, at least the ones they got built. Evidently, a lot of them have been cleared, but no roads have been built. Fantastic. And the leaders of the conference, not the indigenous people who live in these forests, who have always lived in these forests, who worship these forests in some instances, No, the leaders of the conference on saving the forest are the very ones who, someone mentioned Drax. They chop down forest, raw timber to make wood pellets or to burn forest trash. They want renewable motor fuel. And so what they do is they chop down rainforest in Indonesia and Malaysia and plant palm oil plantations. It's sustainable. Well, you wipe out all the biodiversity, the different kinds of trees. You got this palm oil. It won't stay palm oil if you stop buying. They won't stay a palm plantation if you stop buying the oil, and the oil doesn't reduce carbon that much. So, hypocrisy, thy name is cop, once and forever. I should have put on my little
Might have.
You should put the hat on. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just didn't know it was going to go in that direction. Sorry about that.
Sure. That's right. As John Z says, Sterling's not wearing his hat, so we're safe. But yeah, not really. Sometimes the fire comes out anyways. All right. Let's get to our next one. This is actually also related to COP, of course. This was early in the week. We saw this one from the BBC. The COP pledge is defeat the deniers. Headline: Fight fake news and defeat climate deniers. Brazil's Lula tells UN talks. The world must defeat climate denialism and fight fake news. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has told the opening meeting of the UN climate talks. In a rallying cry to COP30, President Lula again made thinly veiled references to President Donald Trump, who branded climate change, quote, a con job in September. The 2 weeks of talks kicked off on Monday in the lush Brazilian city of Belém on the edge of the Amazon rainforest. They take place against a fraught political backdrop, and the U.S. has sent no senior officials. Addressing the conference, President Lula said, COP30 will be the COP of truth. And in an era of, quote, fake news and misrepresentation and, quote, rejection of scientific evidence. Without naming President Trump, President Lula continued, quote, they control the algorithms, sow hatred, and spread fear. It's time to inflict a new defeat on the deniers. Anthony, a new defeat. Now, that could only mean one of two things. One, our side has done some winning. And two, we've been defeated before. Either way, the alarmist side is in trouble.
Yeah, they are. And, we're having an impact. We're having an impact worldwide. We've had an impact for a long time with people that are thinkers, but now we're starting to have an impact with people that are not so much a thinker. We are reaching people who just simply read headlines, and they're starting to question this. And so they're in a panic state. All of their big plans, no matter what they were, are starting to crumble. People didn't show up to COP30. Trump didn't show up, obviously, but a lot of other world leaders didn't. A lot of companies didn't show up. And I saw a report yesterday where a lot of media didn't even bother to show up. Yeah. And so when you've got that kind of a lackluster response to the conference that's going to save the world, they're in deep doo-doo. And it's going to get worse, I figure.
The leaders of the three top emitting countries weren't there. Russia's leader wasn't there. Big surprise there. He might get arrested if he travels anywhere. Someone wrote it in the column over here. Lula says, this is the COP of truth. Does that mean 29 other cops were all the cops of lies? That's the implication. This one's the truth. Well, we weren't telling you the truth before, but now we really mean it. And of course, what his whole speech was about, what Gutierrez has said before, UN's Gutierrez, is it's not about truth. It's about the suppression of dissent. It is about censorship. It is about threats to anyone who would disagree with the COP consensus of evermore, the gravy train's got to keep going. We got to keep fighting climate change that we can't actually control. But if we throw enough money and we put enough bureaucrats in charge, somehow the world will be a better place. It won't change the climate, but it'll be a better place.
Yeah.
The whole speech was not about truth. It was about stopping the truth from getting out. It was about stopping debate from continuing, from allowing certain voices to be able to voice themselves, their views, no matter how educated their views may be or informed. So if Lula wants to go on record as saying this is the cop of truth, implying that 29 other cops were all lies, I'm happy to leave it at that.
Yeah. Chris, this was, I don't know, maybe it wasn't personally directed at you. Maybe you do have international political leaders noticing your X feed because you're out there in the battle every day, and you can get pretty salty sometimes with because you seem to be under constant attack, but you're not going to stop talking.
No, I get attacked probably now more than any other climate skeptic at this point. That used to be people like Tony Heller and Anthony Watts. Of course, he probably still does because of the blog, but at least online, on Twitter and Facebook, it is relentless towards me. And I think a lot of that's because I'm young, and I'm, people like me and Linnea are reaching very young people. A significant portion of my audience, I think like 23%, I looked at the stats, is like 18 to 29-year-olds, like 23% or something like that. And most of the rest of my audience is Gen X, so people that are in their 40s and 50s, maybe early 60s, my parents' age. And those are the younger generations that are reading my stuff. I have several people of Congress that follow me. I have celebrities who follow me. I have other international politicians who follow me, especially from the UK and Australia. And I'm having an impact. And I've been mentioned on Fox News. I've been interviewed on Newsmax and One America News. And we're reaching young people, and that's scaring them. They are going in, the attacks are increasing because we're all being effective, all of us here on this panel. And what's interesting is that there's an organized campaign, it seems, to stop me. I actually had a meteorologist yesterday. He's a private sector consulting meteorologist in Virginia. He runs his own company, and he's actually been banned from several weather boards because he's just incredibly vulgar and rude online to everybody. And he told me that he's going to report my tweet to the American Meteorological Society and Millersville University, which is where I graduated from. And I told him, I said, I don't know what you're going to accomplish with this. You're probably a moron because I graduated in May. What are they going to do? Is the HR lady there going to continue complaining about me, as I've heard through the grapevine? What are they going to do about it? And the American Meteorological Society, I couldn't care less about. My membership's probably going to lapse in January if it hasn't already. And their conferences are overpriced. It costs like $800 to go. Why would I pay that kind of money to go watch people talk? What are they going to do? Remove my membership? Oh boy, I'm so scared. They're ineffective. As Donald Trump goes, these great scammers are quite horrible. They're the worst people on the planet. They're getting desperate. So it's they have no gas. Quite frankly, it's the worst group of people. And the younger generations, the Zoomers, as I call them, are getting very effective on what's called TikTok. I think it's TikTok and the Snapchat and Twitter. There's this guy, Chris Martz, and then Linnea at Heartland. They're doing a great job.
Thank you, Donald Trump.
done.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That is good stuff. So yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's like decades and decades of indoctrination from the most powerful positions on the globe. And it's not taken with you, Chris, and it's not taken with you, Linnea, and it's not taken with a lot of people. So when your enemies are in a panic, that is a reason to celebrate. So congratulations to you, Chris. And yeah, I know you have a lot of fans on this show, and we saw them in the comments already. So Congratulations on that. All right. So speaking of COP, our main topic today is going to be checking in on, I pulled up a few stories here to check in on what's been happening in this first week of COP 30 down in Brazil. This actually, one of the things I want to bring up here first is actually from that earlier BBC article where Brazil's Lula is very upset at the likes of us. He says here that that Brazil wants to use his presidency of the talks to secure progress on key promises made in previous COPs. President Lula's centerpiece is a fund called the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, TFFF, that Brazil hopes will raise $125 billion to protect tropical forests globally. Well, fundraising for that got off to a slow start. Last week, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said at the last minute that the UK would not be contributing public money. Well, but then on Monday, he sent a janitor in, UK climate envoy Rachel Kite. She told BBC News that the fund was a brilliant idea and that the UK will, quote, make the investment at some point. I believe that is a negotiating tactic called "I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today." And more from the story. After a fight, nations finally agreed to a conference agenda on Monday. It promises to consider the question of whether countries can still work towards keeping global temperature rise to 1.5 C above pre-industrial levels. Sterling, I want to ask you a question here, because this is one here. I always go to you with this question about global temperatures, because I thought we were past this. I thought we've already hit 1.5. And so this is not going to happen. I mean, shouldn't any future COPs, if they occur, just focus on adaptation, if any adaptation is even necessary?
It's like, I don't think that they listen to themselves. I don't think, it's like, the 1.5, if it hasn't been passed, everyone admits it's going to be passed. That is gone. Like my 61st birthday, it's passed. You can't stop it, folks. It's inexplicable how they're holding up meetings talking about whether it's possible when everyone knows that it's either passed already or is not possible. We had a whole year where it's above 1.5. In the oldest temperature gauges in existence, the longest continuously operating ones over in the UK, I believe, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, it shows that we're past 2. And this is the killer of it all. They can hold meetings talking about 1.5. They can hold meetings talking about 2. They can hold meetings talking about 3 or 3.5 or 5, whatever meetings they want to hold. There's no evidence whatsoever, not a scintilla of proof or data or evidence outside of computer models, which aren't evidence, they're tools, that there's any tipping point at any of those temperature changes. Global average temperature is made up. There's no, you don't stick a thermometer in the Earth's orifice, wherever you'd find it, and read a temperature and say, "Ooh, it's above what the norm is." We made that up.
That was an image I did not need, Sterling.
Yeah. It's some volcano somewhere. Don't worry about it. They made up the 1.5 as a political ploy. They made up the 2 as a political ploy. And now, what really I find funding is they're saying now, oh, well, the trajectory is much lower than it was previously. Not at the last COP, but say 5 or 6 years ago. Before, we were saying it was going to be 3 to 6. No, you weren't saying that. No, you weren't saying that. That was the extreme scenarios. Now they're looking at the less extreme scenarios that existed before, but they didn't care about. And they're saying, oh, well, we're only on the trajectory for 3.5 now. And we can get below that. We can get below that, because 3.5, what they want to do is take credit. They want to say all the actions we've taken up till now have put us on a lower trajectory, except for one thing. I don't know how they make the case, because emissions have not fallen. emission rates really haven't fallen that much. If emissions drive temperature, then we're still on whatever trajectory we were on before. They just make stuff, they throw stuff against the wall, hope some of it sticks, and if some of it appears to stick, that's what they focus on. So now they're trying to get a victory out of the jaws of a PR victory out of the jaws of defeat, which is, oh, well, our past conferences have lowered the trajectory. It'd be much higher. The trajectory would be much higher now if we hadn't made all those treaties and all those commitments that not a single one of which have been met. By the way, check out my Red State article today on that very point. We've made dozens of commitments to cut emissions, to flatline emissions. We were supposed to 30 years ago, the 1992 Rio Earth Summit, we committed to capping, to reaching 1990 levels by the year 2000. 25 years have passed. We still haven't reached 1990 levels. And that was the least stringent of all the agreements we've come to, none of which we've met. So how have we changed our trajectory?
Wishes were fishes, Sterling.
For sure.
They could be more effective if they could get Dr. Seuss to write their script.
Yeah. Well,
At least it would rhyme.
Yeah, that's true. I'm still trying to get the rectal thermometer for the Earth image out of my head. So thanks. You're all welcome for me bringing it back up again if you tried and were successful.
You don't have to be so anal about it.
Oh. For sure. All right. Here's another story I wanted to hit on as well, just to try to give people a flavor of what's going on down there at COP30. This comes from the Daily Caller, and the headline is UN official orders Brazil to get it together over absolute climate fest dumpster fire. Our friend Craig Rucker alluded to a little bit of this earlier. Let me read some of it for you. A top United Nations official reportedly directed Brazilian authorities to immediately address concerns like leaky light fixtures, unbearable heat, and inadequate security personnel at the COP30 climate conference in Belém, according to Bloomberg. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Executive Secretary Simon Steele reportedly wrote to Brazilian officials on Wednesday, demanding that the state manage security lapses like unsecured doors and insufficient security staffing, according to Bloomberg News. He reportedly noted in the letter that Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's office asked state police not to disperse the activists that stormed COP30 on Tuesday. Quote, the security forces and command structure required to execute the security plan were all present on the ground during the incident, but failed to act. This represents a serious breach of the established security framework. Boy, you don't want to mess off bureaucrats, I tell you what. So it notes that over 200 countries and 50,000 people are in attendance at COP30, but attendees have been plagued by protesters, flooding, high temperatures during the conference that is now set to run until November 21st. About 150 protesters stormed the conference on Tuesday and caused a fracas in which 2 security guards were injured, with one being taken out on a wheelchair while holding his stomach, reported Sky News. At the conference venue, rain has poured in from, quote, the ceiling and light fixtures, creating not only disruption, but a potential safety hazard due to electrical exposure, the letter said. Poor air conditioning and hot temperatures have also endangered attendees, according to Bloomberg News, with Steele reportedly arguing that the situation required, quote, immediate intervention to, quote, safeguard the well-being of delegates and personnel, as there had already been, quote, instances of heat-related health concerns. Additionally, one Associated Press reporter stated that an indigenous people's performance was interrupted by a power failure on Monday. And as mentioned before, on top of that, they were told not to dispose of their used toilet paper in the toilets, but to put it into trash cans. So, Linnea, I want to say that this COP is turning into a shit show, and I think that's clearly self-evident. It's a shit show.
I have this for them. What this is my tiny violin, and leaking light fixtures. That I'm aghast. What a terrible thing. I would feel bad for them if I didn't Well,
Yeah.
I would feel bad for them if I felt bad for them, but I really don't at all.
You hold a conference in a rainforest with poor infrastructure, and then you're surprised when there's leaking and rain.
Yeah.
And as far as the protesters, all of a sudden, the cop folks who are all in favor of protests when they're Extinction Rebellion or somebody wants to glue themselves to a road or throw some paint on some portraits to protest climate change. Now they're against protesters. Now they're calling for Bull Connor to show up with the dogs and the hoses.
But I think this is just, they're just getting the full like Brazil experience from what I understand. There isn't, because weren't the Rio Olympics something like this as well?
Yeah.
If I recall. Yeah, it's boy, yeah. In the immortal words of the Joker, you get what you deserve, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really hard to feel bad for them on this issue. They picked a bad location, as we said earlier. They shouldn't be having these conferences. One of our viewers asked earlier, why don't they do these things over Zoom if they're so worried about climate change? Well, again, they're not so worried about climate change, and they would much rather have a fun conference in a exotic location than, practice what they preach. So, oh yeah.
The whole thing has turned into a farce, and the fact that the media is recognizing and talking about it means it really, really is a farce, and you look at all of the stuff that they've been reporting on and you wonder, what in the heck were they thinking putting this thing together? I mean, light fixtures that are pouring water out. Woof. Anyway, it's almost become a Seinfeldian moment, from that sitcom. Yeah, exactly.
That's a shame. Yeah.
Right. It's hilarious. And like Linnea says, it's hard to feel sad for these people because they engineered and brought all of this on themselves. And I am so thankful that Sterling and I did not go. And we didn't go because they had the most bizarre sign up I've ever seen for a hotel. You had to get a booking in this one particular hotel in order to get the pass, in order to get in. The hotel required you to give your bank account, not a credit card. They would not take credit card. You had to put your bank account in there. And at that point I said, I'm not giving my bank account to somebody in South America. End of story.
But Anthony, I kept trying to convince you it's okay. It was a Nigerian prince. If you can't trust a Nigerian prince who owns a hotel in Belém, Brazil, who can you trust?
Yeah. Chris, I mean, my favorite part there's lots of great parts of that little bit I extracted out, but like the gall of these people to complain that the air conditioning sucks, that it's not good enough. These of all people.
Yeah, they brought it on themselves.
They tell us they constantly preach we've got to stop eating meat. They go to Brazil, one of the most meat-heavy, beef-heavy countries on earth. They have restaurants here in Dallas called Fogo de Chao in Texas de Brazil, where they walk around with big skewers of meat. And what were they eating the first night there? Brazilian beef. You eat bugs for you, beef bourguignon for me. That's these people. They are hypocrites. And, I think they're trying to appear as if they care about developing countries by hosting them in cities in developing countries that aren't necessarily outfitted well for these kinds of things. For a long time, all the meetings were Berlin, Kyoto, Paris, or even, where they had one a few years ago I think in UAE or Dubai, right?
Yeah.
But then, they went to, where was it last year? Was it Azerbaijan, right? And it looked nice, but not one of your 5-star destinations typically for travelers. Belém, Brazil. Okay, you might go to Brazil for Rio, maybe for Sao Paulo, but Belém, that doesn't leap to mind. And not next year, but the year after, they already scheduled it. It's going to be in someplace in Ethiopia. I'd love to see Ethiopia. I want to go see the but I can't imagine the infrastructure issues they're going to have if in Ethiopia, especially if an outbreak of conflicts between them and the Eritreans happens again. Look, these people, I'm sure some of them are very bright, but they don't know much about logistics. They could use a few engineers amongst them.
Come on, Sterling, you're being too logical.
Some of them are bright, but some of them brighten up a room when they leave.
Yeah. You know, Sterling, I keep hearing, and we've covered this on climaterealism.com a whole lot of times, that Somalia is actually one of the hardest hit by climate change out of all countries in the world. They might even be warming faster than the rest of the world. They really should think about, they really should be thinking about putting their conference in Somalia, for fairness. And I
on
would
the border, on the
that.
border between southern Somalia and northern Somalia.
Yes, I would love to see that.
Back into the warlord hotel.
You talk about a quick end to COP altogether. As the warlords storm in, they don't have to worry about warriors or protesters. The warlords storm in with AKs and start spraying the room, and suddenly there's no more cops because there's no one left to attend them.
Yeah, well, they should just have the next one in Timbuktu, which is slang in certain generations for where the hell is that? Because that's basically where every one of these has been. So, all right, a couple more things before we get to Q&A I wanted to cover from this, from the COP, is that, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, since the Trump administration did not send an official delegation, he took it upon himself to be the United States representative at COP 30, and he said that he is going to be the one that will be negotiating with the United Nations on climate, supposedly. So anyway, we have a video that I think Anthony found for us this week. If you could play that for us, Andy.
They're not interested in this debate. They are flooding the zone, and they're going to dominate in the next great global industry. So I'm here as well from an economic prism. The United States of America is dumb as we want to be on this topic, but the state of California is not. And so we are going to assert ourselves, we're going to lean in, and we are going to compete in this space. But we can't do that without all of you. And this is how I'll end, with humility and grace and understanding that we need to build partnerships and we need to build on collaboration. So we're here with an open hand, not a closed fist.
Humility and grace are two words that man does not understand.
No. I love it when someone says they're humble as they're bragging about being humble.
Yeah, two words.
I'm here with humility. Really? You have to tell the world? Humility is what people recognize in you, not what you say yourself you have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason I wanted to play that for this is just to underscore the point that the United States government is out of the COP in the United Nations climate business. I mean, we have not fully pulled out of the
UNFCCC.
The UNFCCC, the underlining treaty in the for the whole climate scam globally. So we haven't fully pulled out of that, although I think it's something not even to hope for, but maybe even expect before the end of Trump's second term. But it's so bad that they have to send a slimy used car salesman like Gavin Newsom over there so that the climate alarmists can pretend somebody cares about it in this country, because nobody really does.
Hey, Newsom gives used car salesman a bad name. That's not fair, Jim.
Yeah,
that's just not fair. That's unfair.
Yeah, I've actually bought a decent used car from a guy that wore plaid pants.
Yes. And snakes actually make lovely pets. So, Gavin Newsom is below all of them.
I've read the Constitution a bit, and I forget where in there where states are allowed to make their own treaties with foreign countries and foreign entities. I don't think if you read it carefully, you'll find that
without Senate approval.
Yeah, without Senate approval. So I don't think that will fly. You can make your state. You can set policies that will make your state net zero if you want, but since there's interstate commerce, a lot of those policies are just going to get trashed.
Yeah. I want to bring up the point that this whole thing has been going on for years, and here's the results. We've had all these different agreements for all these different conferences, and this is a little bit dated. you know, and so I'm going to have to update this to be, include COP30. But look at all of these agreements that were supposedly saving the planet, all the way from the very first one in Rio up to more recent ones, you know, and the bottom line is that the UN has been completely ineffectual at stopping carbon dioxide rise around the planet. And so what's the point? There is no point. They should just give up, because all they're doing is wasting everybody's money and time.
And contrary to the implication, they're now saying, oh, well, we changed the trajectory of temperature, but they haven't changed the trajectory of CO2 emissions. So if temperature trajectory has changed and CO2 emissions haven't, that means that physically CO2 has not been driving temperature change, which of course is one of the things that we at Climate Realism have pretty much long argued.
One of my favorite arguments when I posted graphs like this, I think I have posted one that's similar to this that's more recent, but I don't know if I still have it. But they say that, well, this is proof that organizations like Evil Heartland Institute and CFACT have engaged in a campaign against science. What it actually shows, if we were to believe them, is that their science is not credible or resonating with the public or politicians, because that the CO2 is going up and they say it's a crisis, and yet all these actions and conferences haven't done anything. That means their science isn't good.
Yeah, well, if we're going to be called evil at the Heartland Institute, evil against science, I want the title of Dr. Evil. I don't want to get a cat.
No.
How dare you?
Give up your hair, Anthony. I'm closest to that, and I don't like it. So I take that affectation.
We will save the planet for $1 trillion.
All right.
Sorry, Anthony, that role is already taken by Klaus Schwab. So
that is already taken. All right. Well, I know we have a lot of questions for the panel, including our special guest, Chris Martz, today. So we're going to get to Q&A. But before that, I want to talk to you a little bit about the sponsor that we're very proud to have of this program, and that is Advisor Metals. If you listen to lots of conservative shows out there, you hear tons of pitches about buying gold, silver, and other precious metals. There are so many companies out there, but we want to tell you why you should trust our sponsor, Advisor Metals, and it's the man who runs the company, Ira Bershatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he does not employ those high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys that you see from a lot of firms in big gold. He also does not deal in rare coins. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing always in quality bullion, and that is so much better when it comes time to liquidate this valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have your investment sent discreetly, directly to your very home. Oh, and Ira, by the way, is advertising on this program and our In the Tank podcast on Thursdays because he is an America First patriot. He does not donate to Democrats. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party, and he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. And that's why we are very proud to have Advisor Metals as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your portfolio or back up your IRA with real physical bullion and of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and then Ira will be in touch with you and make the process extremely easy. Again, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals and be sure to tell them who sent you. That would be us, because that helps this program while you're helping your financial future. All right. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and it is time for Q&A.
hate. All right.
I just want to say, someone asked whether gold is CO2 neutral. I guarantee you, any gold you send my way will go into my safe and will be CO2 neutral. It will not be emitting anything while it's in my safe.
Oh, I can personally guarantee that there is no carbon in your gold. There-
Right, but
or at least
there's CO2 emitted in mining it, and that makes it
That's
terrible.
that's
So
sunk
all of
that's
you
sunk
guys
cost,
out there
Anthony.
that hate that worry about the planet, give up your gold. Send it to us here at the
Yeah.
Heartland Institute.
Yeah.
We will put it in sequestration to keep it safe and keep the planet safe.
Exactly. We will
All
sequester.
right. I've got a question that I want to start out with for Chris here from our frequent viewer, Jerry, who says, as he is the youngest on the panel, could Chris give a brief assessment of the indoctrination about climate and education and what triggered him to seek alternate information? You are muted. For
You are
some reason.
muted.
I am.
Mutant.
Second time that's happened. Yes, this is a question I get quite a bit. And I gotta say that at least at my university that I went to, there's not a whole lot of indoctrination that goes on with climate. We're pretty strictly focused on meteorology. And our climate dynamics course, Dr. Yalda, she's fantastic. She's one of my favorite professors I've ever had. And she just gives a kind of balanced, approach to everything. Nothing alarmist, but not skeptic either, but just kind of balanced. However, that's not the case at other universities. I've had some horror stories from fellow people that are about my age that have graduated or still are in their college classes that they really grind it hard on the alarmist side of the argument. However, when I was really young in elementary school, middle school, high school, there were teachers that fearmongered about climate change and stuff, and I believed it. I would get into arguments with my dad about climate change and stuff. He's like, "It's a natural cycle," and I'm like, "No, it's not. We're killing everything. We're all gonna die." And after some headlines in the media about Hurricane Harvey and some extreme weather events didn't add up, I started doing my own research, and I realized how extreme the weather was in the past, and I became interested in learning about the data in meteorology, and that's what I decided to pursue a meteorology degree.
Awesome. Yeah, that was more or less my experience in college too. I had maybe two professors who were obnoxious about it, but mostly just the facts. I think the worst one we did was when we were doing the intro to climate modeling stuff, and I was a petroleum engineer, so I wasn't even in it for that. But I was my minor was in geology, so I took a whole bunch of remote sensing and that kind of thing for that purpose. But anyway. Okay.
Hey, Lenny, I have a question. When geologists go to church, do they sing Rock of Ages?
Yeah.
No.
Definitely. All right. Let's see. Okay, this one. Oh, we once again have questions from last week on here for some reason. Sometimes they don't delete between times, so I'll have to look. Okay, Ed Reed asks regarding that the AMOC model that we were looking at earlier, what makes this model more accurate than all of the others? So why
Absolutely nothing.
what would
Absolutely nothing.
what would the scientists argue makes their slowing down model more accurate than all of the ones that say it's speeding up?
I don't think within the article they say they explain why you should trust theirs more. It's just that's what their research based on their model says. Now, why? And then they will point to other studies that say the same thing based on different models, and ignore all the studies that say the opposite based on different models. But I've never seen. I didn't see any of the news stories where they explain why we should trust theirs as opposed to others.
Yeah, they usually just ignore that the other studies exist.
Yeah.
And so James has this thing that he loves to do where he collects all of the screenshots of the articles saying one way or the other with the date on them. And then he puts them into a PowerPoint presentation so that he can just flick through the timeline of the Gulf collapse or speed up or collapse or speed up. And they all have the same conclusion, which is that whichever one it does, it's going to be a major disaster for everybody.
And it's caused by human activities.
Yeah.
That's the other
Yeah.
conclusion.
With the AMOC thing, what's really interesting to me is that if it supposedly collapses, which it's not going to, I mean, it could slow down, but that could be natural, as it has in the past. But if that results in Europe cooling, then that's going to cause sea ice to grow, and then the rest of the northern hemisphere to cool, which is going to bring down global average temperature. Isn't that what climate alarmists want?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't.
Be careful what you wish for.
Careful what you wish for.
Alrighty, let me look. Here's a good question from It Is I Too, who is also a frequent viewer of ours, who says, how much money do we waste on these studies?
Billions and billions.
Thank you, Carl Sagan.
Billions and billions.
I saw I'm going to try and find it real quick because I'm going to be referencing this study in Climate Change Weekly next week, where they talk about how much money we've spent or we spend annually. And
okay, I'm going to get on the next question, then you bring that up when we get there. Okay. Walter said, who is also a frequent viewer of ours, man, we've got the whole team is here. The whole crew is here today. He says government funded academic climate research grants have been focused for decades to promote the AGW scam. Dr. Happer says that we are, because of this, way behind on real climate research. Any change with the Trump administration? This is for anybody who wants to hit on it.
Well, I know that a couple of researchers, and one who's actually probably watching right now, who's been able to secure some funding from the Department of Energy, I think. So they're able to get some researchers are able to get funding through there. But getting stuff like NSF grants and stuff is a bit more challenging. It's going to take a while to change the front on that, I think, from my perspective.
Yeah, I have it on pretty good authority that there may be some news on that front before the year is out. I'll just leave it there.
See, now I'm jazzed, Jim. All right. Chris Nisbet says, as well as the usual stuff like temperature differentials, ice melt, etc., how much, if anything, does the rotation of the Earth have to do with those currents? Chris, do you know?
Actually, I think it probably has some effect on it, but I'll defer to Anthony on that one.
Yeah, Anthony, what you got?
Well, there's the Coriolis force, of course.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Jumps in on that. So that has some effect. But really, the main effect is the difference in temperature between latitudes. The oceans are finding a way to keep that in balance. And so, these different currents develop. That's really the gist of it.
Well, the story said that it's Greenland ice melt that is causing a potential catastrophe, right? And the assumption here is that human emissions of carbon dioxide is accelerating Greenland ice melt. But there is no science that I have seen, maybe you guys have seen it, that connects those two.
No,
Yep.
not really.
Let
We'll have
me-
to invent some.
let me weigh in now because I found the article I was looking for.
Okay.
It's not on the cost of the studies. I've got no idea how much the government has spent on these studies. But so by 2020, governments had spent $100 billion on climate change. And just last year, private banks and companies spent $137 billion on climate change. If those annual numbers go on, let's see, for developing countries, nations at Baku agreed to work to boosting annual funding to at least 1.3 trillion. Now, that's greater than the GDP of probably the vast majority of countries, certainly developing countries. And I think they'd just be better off. I mean, I don't think welfare is very helpful, but rather than climate spending, they'd just be better off if we just spent them suitcases of money, pallets of money. Let's just send them here. If we're going to spend 1.3 trillion, let's just ship pallets of money to every developing country and let them figure out, because the quickest thing to get them out of poverty and to make them more resilient in the face of climate change, whatever the cause and whatever direction it goes, is to make them wealthy.
Yeah, maybe we could get some of our pallets of money out of our big oil bunker and ship them out. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
All right. Here's a question from Ian, who says, is ocean darkening a thing? I read a mainstream media or an MSM.com probably article about this. I have not heard of this. Anybody?
Oh, I think that's got to do with pollutants such as phosphates and so forth that get into the ocean and then cause algal blooms, which causes a darkening of the surface, which then causes more sunlight to be absorbed, which then causes the ocean to heat up. Yeah, it's a thing, and it's mainly caused by chemical pollutants that act as nutrients for algae.
There's also phytoplankton. So changes in that can also make the ocean darker and it absorbs more sunlight.
Right.
I think that.
But of course, the phytoplankton is good because it takes CO2 out of the atmosphere and it feeds the food chain of the oceans.
Yep.
It's the basis of the.
Alrighty, let's see. This is from Marianne, who I don't think I've seen in the chat before, so welcome, Marianne, who says, what is your take on NATO's climate engineering wreaking havoc on the very trees and plants that process carbon dioxide into oxygen?
I don't think there is any NATO climate engineering. I think whatever she's referring to is just one of the common ridiculous memes that circulates the internet, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't know about this, unless you're talking about them like cutting down rainforest or something for the COP.
I've never heard of NATO doing this. The geoengineering stuff. There's a lot of forest cutting down going on, and it's being done at the behest or incentivized by governments, and sometimes by governments themselves. But I'm not sure NATO's leading that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Alrighty. We have our viewers are so funny. They're always asking, kind of sarcastic questions here. So I'll bring one of these up. Jacob says, no power, no water, no nothing. That's what the alarmists want so badly, don't they? At the conference. Yeah, they're getting a taste of what they advocate for.
Well, what they ultimately want is no people.
Yeah.
Except them.
Stephen Fraser says, do we know who the attendees were? I would bet the majority are nations that want reparations for climate damage or for alleged climate damage.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Tuvalu had a big booth,
Yep.
Funded undoubtedly by taxes on tourism that they have that's been expanding down there.
Quickly, Bob Johnson asks, is hurricane season over yet? Statistics, do we have stats on deaths in the U.S., property damage money? When are we getting those articles about how catastrophic this year was?
16 more
days left.
16 more days.
Yeah, we can still get hurricanes in December and even January.
You can get them anytime. Yeah,
but it's
right.
rare. But hurricane season's about over.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can bet though, if we do get a December hurricane, it will be called something related to climate change, of course.
And it's not.
What's actually interesting is I was talking to Dr. John Christie about this recently because he thought it was interesting. I reconstructed U.S. hurricane landfalls back to 1800 because the actual data goes back to 1851 in the HERDAT2 database. But I read some books and papers and stuff, and I tallied them up and looked at their intensities, and there's still no trend. It's actually slightly downward, even since 1800. And in a few of those, I think in 1830s, there were a couple of December hurricanes that went through the Caribbean. So if that ever were to happen again, there is historical precedent.
How dare you commit an act of science, Chris? What do you think you are, a meteorologist or something?
How dare you?
And Chris, what's interesting about that? You read that stuff, you've pieced it together, and that's just the hurricanes that we've been able to identify and know of.
Yeah.
Look, that means that there were probably even more back then than you know of, because if they didn't make landfall and ships didn't come across them and report them, they for all intents and purposes, they're like the tree in the forest. They didn't make a sound. They weren't known.
Yeah. Well, another thing too is that after we had Hurricane Melissa, there was a lot of people claiming that we've had an unprecedented number of category 5s in recent years. And part of the reason for that is because obviously we didn't have satellites monitoring this prior to 1966. And even then, before the 1980s, the intensities are not really, they're really underestimated because the satellite data wasn't that good and the recon data is usually done closer to shore. So when the storms were out over the open water, we had no idea what their intensities were to a precise measure. Another thing to consider is there was a study published in 2012 by Chris Lancy and another guy at NOAA. I think it might have been Tom Knutson. And he published this article about how there were 10 category 5 hurricanes between 1992, Hurricane Andrew, and Hurricane Felix in 2007. And of those 10 hurricanes, only 2 of them would have been rated category 5, which would have been Hurricane Mitch in 1998 and Hurricane Andrew in 92, had they been observed with 1940s and 50s technology.
Well, and you talk about category 5. Categories like that are a fairly recent invention as well. The Saphir, is it Whorf Saphir? I forget, but the whole rating system wasn't developed until the 1970s.
All right, sorry, I was just peeking through my list here trying to find more questions. Climateville asked this question and I lost it, and so I believe they've posted it again. Says, didn't Gates want to cut down trees and bury them? I'd call that nutto engineering. That one's for you, Anthony.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I don't have a comeback for that one. It's pretty good on its own.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether Gates called for that. I can't speak to it.
I don't know if Gates said to do that, but I have heard that proposed as a carbon sequestration method. And
What?
yeah, why wouldn't you just build houses with it? Wouldn't that also sequester the tree carbon? I don't know. We can just, as one of our viewers said earlier, we can just send them all to Drax so that they can burn them, because that's apparently carbon neutral.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Jerry Palmer asks, how much of the world do we have to destroy in order to save it?
That's the whole "we had to burn the village to save it" meme, you know, from Vietnam.
Alrighty. Do we know when where the next COP is being held? Is that the Ethiopia one, or Jim? What you got?
No. Sterling was getting one ahead of the next one. The next one is supposed to be in what they call the Western European and Others group, which basically means Western Europe, North America, and Australia and New Zealand. So they have not, to my knowledge, I looked it up because I saw that question earlier in the show. So I wanted to get it for you guys, but they have not decided on it yet. I'm sure they probably have. They just haven't announced it yet. So it'd be awesome if it was in the United States.
Yeah, I hope it's here. Or in Canada.
I have a
That
feeling
would
it's
be
not going to be a
awesome.
domestic trip for us this year.
I would go if they put it in the Yukon. I would go in Canada.
I would go
That'd be awesome.
and show up in my truck and get some rolling coal.
Yeah, roll coal outside. You could probably get hundreds of people to go roll coal at SCOP.
Yeah,
That's probably why they won't have it here.
If they were to do it in like Western Canada, I would take some time off and go and get myself a hunting license up there. And enjoy it.
Roll in with your truck with your shotgun on your gun rack behind your head. You know, that will freak them all out.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to. I'd be worried that they would like break into my car and steal things. So I don't
Not in
trust
Canada. In
people.
Canada, that doesn't happen.
No, not in
There's
Canada.
no crime in Canada.
Never. In Mikhail Johansson, which I think I said your name right. It's either Mikhail or it's Michael, who is also a frequent visitor of ours. And I am sure that I have said his name differently every single time I've brought his comment up. He says, how did Brazil justify removing all those trees for the highway to the COP conference and the 2 cruise ship hotels from Europe? Did they even justify it?
Yeah, I don't think they did. I honestly don't think. Look, when you are a leftist, being a leftist means never having to say you're sorry, right? It's all justified by the greater good. In this case, the greater good of hosting the climate conference and bringing the plight of the world's forests that we cut down to the world.
I think that they did try justifying it based on the idea that I think the highway was actually proposed before the conference ever even was announced to be there, but they didn't the construction kind of stalled on it. And then when the conference was announced, they're like, oh, we got to get this done. And I think that's what they tried justifying it with.
All right, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I want to get to this question from Jeffrey Robertson, who says, there are many graphs plotting historical carbon dioxide versus temperature, but has anyone modeled paleo temperatures based on the AGW hypothesis? What would the models do with 1600 plus parts per million? Anthony?
Well, I was going to call up a graph, but I realized we don't have a lot of time for that, and I had to do some searching for it. But the models, depends on the models you're using. Now, if you're using an honest model, you would find that 1600 parts per million doesn't really make that much difference compared to where we're at now at around 425 or 430 parts per million, because the effect of CO2 in the atmosphere towards temperature is logarithmic. The more and more carbon dioxide you put in the atmosphere, the less and less it elevates the temperature. And so in a real world scenario, honest world scenario, it would not be all that much hotter. However, when you're thinking of things like RCP 8.5 world, it's zoom.
Well, in RCP 8.5, probably the oceans would be boiling.
That's true. That's a favorite of the UN. They love those boiling oceans.
Yeah. One last thing to add about this before we wrap up is that, we're trying to model these things. We don't know the natural energy flows in and out of the Earth's climate system to the nearest enough precision to really tell the effect of anthropogenic impact on it from CO2. Because the energy imbalance caused by that is about 6 to 8 times smaller than the accuracy to which we can measure those energy flows. And so modelers just force the energy flows to balance, and then they jack up the CO2 and say, look, well, CO2 causes warming. But they don't know. They just assume that the Earth's climate system was in a harmonic state of energy balance before the Industrial Revolution, which is a very bad assumption.
Yeah, it's like Trenberth said way back at ClimateGate, we can't account for the missing heat, and it's a travesty.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm sorry, guys. We don't have much time left. We've gone even more over how we always go over our time. So I'm going to hand it back to Jim here. And thank you guys so much for your questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to them all, but we appreciate them a lot. And keep coming back and asking them, because we're going to try to get to as many as we can each and every episode. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much to everybody in the chat who left questions or didn't leave questions. It's always very lively. I know everybody there has a lot of fun having their own conversation while listening to this conversation about climate realism. I want to thank our special guest today, Chris Martz. So great. A little bit of a last minute. You took the request yesterday evening, and here you are on the show. Appreciate it. Always a lot of fun to have you on. I know we will have you back on. Thank you very much, Sterling Burnett and Linnea Lucan and Anthony Watts, our usual panel here on the Climate Realism Show. I want to implore you to go to climaterealism.com, where you can see articles where we correct the alarmist spin that you see in the mainstream media at least 3 times a week, often more. Go to climateataglance.com, where you can get the digital version of the brand new edition, the second edition of Climate at a Glance, the book, which you can get at amazon.com. Just put in Climate at a Glance second edition, and you can get your own copy sent to you to your very home. Go to heartland.org, where you can help support this organization, but especially heartland.org/TCRS. That will help support this show specifically this show. And again, thank you all for being here with us. We will see you again next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Bye-bye.
If you get Climate at a Glance, leave a review.
That's right.